Imagine a future where the government tracks your dreams and taxes just about anything that appears in them. This is the premise of Strawberry Mansion, a whimsical art house science fiction film about auditing the subconscious. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about sci-fi movies. That's simple. And right now, we are making an effort to try and check out sort of recent films from the last few years. That's basically the first half of this decade that have slipped under the radar, that didn't get done in the show, that have maybe got a bit of a cult status, or maybe at least someone somewhere is saying is a hidden gem and giving them a try. This is also a vote winner episode, so there was 3 kind of like lesser known movies put up for vote on Patreon, and the winner was Strawberry Mansion, which is what we're talking about today.
Yes.
So, I assume you had never heard of this until I presented it to you.
What, Peter? I'm appalled. I love tiny little art house indie projects that have gotten zero press whatsoever.
My apologies for making such an assumption.
I went to go find this, and it was on YouTube. It is free, I'm assuming with ads, but I clicked like on it just to be able to find it later on when I was actually sitting down to watch it, and I was the first person to like it. Oh, nobody else has been there.
To be fair, like there are people talking about it online, so I think it's just that the YouTube version is probably a recent thing. Like the like it existed on, I think it was on Prime at one point. I think I saw. Okay. I mean, I'll get into it in a minute, but we'll just say we're starting spoiler free, of course. We'll give you a warning before we get to the spoilers, and if you are enjoying the show, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch. You can also get bonus content by supporting us on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that bonus stuff at the end of the show. So what is Strawberry Mansion? Well, it does get a little strange. It's actually got a very simple premise that's easy to say, which is that it's the near future, 2035, I think they said. Yes. And it is basically a future where our dreams are taxed, and there is audits. And the main character in this film is an auditor for dreams, and looks through your dream recordings. There's technology to do that, and basically just taxes it. And he is sent out on his current task for this old lady who is on old technology. All of her dreams are on VHS tapes, and he has to start wading through them. And yeah, things progress from there, and it goes places, but I feel like any more would be spoilers. Yeah.
No, this is, when you say it goes places, you are absolutely not doing that justice.
Look, I'm keeping it close to the chest.
It's absolutely the best way to go into this movie, I'm sure, but damn, man, does that initial premise gives you maybe like 20 minutes of the movie, tops.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think one thing I would say is that it does keep kind of adding new layers to what the movie is as it goes, which is something we're definitely going to talk about. But we'll get into all that. Yeah, our main characters pretty much consist of 2 people for the most part, and that is the auditor named Preble. Although I kept hearing Pebble throughout the movie, but it's Preble. Played by Kentucker Audley, who is also a co-director on this. Yep. So worth mentioning that. And then the old lady that he's there to audit is Bella, played by Penny Fuller. And there's also a younger version of her we see via dreams, which, to be fair, that's not a surprise. The whole movie's about dreams. So that's Grace Glowicki playing that role, which, for the record, when this movie was done, I immediately went and checked if that is Laura Dern's daughter, because she looks so much like Laura freaking Dern.
I was going to say, she did look very familiar. I couldn't place her, but you saying Laura Dern, I can see that.
Immediately I'm like, oh, that's Laura Dern's daughter. It's not. She has no relation to Laura Dern as far as I know, but she looks so much like Laura Dern, like at a certain age. It's kind of wild, actually.
Yeah.
But so that is the gist of it. So without spoiling a goddamn thing, I'll just simply ask the question, David, what do you think of Strawberry Mansion?
Without spoiling a thing.
Yes.
I think I like it. Like, it's got a lot of interwoven themes to it, and I think that it's very clear by the time you hit the end of the movie, like, what the overarching message is, what different characters represent. This is not a movie of a narrative. Like, there is a narrative going on, but that is not the focus of this movie. The focus of the movie is much more a character piece. It's much more of like diving into even like the themes themselves. The narrative is just there to allow the story to progress, as strange as that sounds. It is weird, it is wacky, it is somewhere between Wes Anderson and Terry Gilliam, I would say. It's like a love child between the two. And it also has a lot of the vibes of, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Adult Swim infomercials, things like Too Many Cooks and stuff like that.
Can't say I am.
It's got just a lot of extra weirdness to it in a lot of spaces. But no, it's I don't know. I finished this one up and I sat with it for a minute, and I was just mainly trying to figure out, do I think that this is saying something more than what is just initially presented? And I think the answer is yes, but I also think I need to like walk it through with you a little bit just to make sure I'm not absolutely out of my mind after watching this. What at times I could very easily describe as a fever dream.
I don't know what it says about me and what movies I've watched over the years, but I didn't think this was that weird.
Yeah, it says so. Here's the thing. As I'm watching this, there's a sequence towards the end. I won't spoil anything, but there's a sequence towards the end that just comes out of nowhere, super strange. I turn it around to my fiance and I say, well, look at this. And like, she watches through. She has no context. She's like, that's extraordinarily strange. And I was like, yeah, it is. And she's like, do you think Pete's going to like it? I was like, I don't know. He likes all that weird art house crap. So maybe.
It gets a little weirder by the end. It's funny, one of the things you said there is that it's not like a super narrative focused movie, it's more of a character and idea focused movie. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's right by the end, but to be honest, I think it's not until like halfway through the movie where it kind of pivots into more of that feeling. I actually think for the first half of the movie, it very equally balances its quirkiness, its ideas, and like an actual narrative with like science fiction mechanics. And if I have I guess a disappointment to mention about the film is that I do think that it kind of, like in the third act, it doesn't really use some of the stuff that it set up in ways that I was kind of excited about it using when it set them up earlier on. Because there's a lot of stuff introduced in the first half of the movie that I was like, oh, and you can do this with this, and everything felt very natural in how it was adding to the layers of the themes and adding to what the movie was going to be about. And it became a bit more again, I'll just say dreamlike, for lack of a better term, in the back half. And I still like what it was doing, but if I have any critiques, it would probably be that like my mind did start going wild with potential like avenues for it to go in, and it kind of like the one that it picked was probably not my favorite of the options, but I still kind of appreciated what it was doing by the end. So yeah, I like this quite a bit. I think for the first like half hour, I thought I was going to adore it, and in the end, I quite liked it. So it went down a touch as it went on, but overall, still quite positive. I do wonder if, like, knowing where it's going on a second viewing, I would have less of a problem with that. Yeah, you know, that shift that I felt as the movie went on. But
yeah, I could definitely see what you're saying about in the first half. It builds up all this potential ideas. It really does have a lot of, I don't want to say sci-fi elements specifically because it's more than that in a lot of ways, but it
is sci-fi elements.
It is, but like there's other things that pile on that don't directly relate to sci-fi, just more philosophical nature sort of things. And then there's a pivot about halfway through the movie where it starts going down much more of the general concepts and themes rather than running with the things that they set up in the beginning. It kind of just lays those off to the side, says, all right, we've done playing with those. Now we're going to go for some more vibes rather than story. Yeah,
it kind of swaps the hard mechanics for more just like symbolism, I would say, at a certain point. And I still quite liked a lot of that stuff. The visuals get kind of insane once it does that, and it does it. And it's kind of delightfully low budget where you can sort of see like the simple ways they did things, but it's endearing and it kind of works. I will say I really like the music. It does this kind of overly dramatic music at points that I thought really kind of added to the absurdity and helped things feel quite big and grand, despite the quite small setting of the film. It's got definitely kind of a style. It always has like a voice. It always feels like a passion project that someone really cares about, or in this case, two directors and whoever else really cares about. Right. It's got quirkiness, it's got ideas, it's got a sense of style. You'll never mistake this for something that was just churned out to make content for a streaming service.
Oh God, no.
There's a lot of little delightful things. So it's definitely something that if you don't like anything that's remotely art house, you'll hate. But I also don't think it's I think it's a lot easier to take than other art house movies, because it's presented in a much more light-hearted manner, at least to begin with. And I feel like it's because I think one of the things that really rub people the wrong way with a lot of art house stuff is the art house stuff often will be very intense, and you're getting like a David Lynch style, like cerebral, like nightmare injected into your brain. This has a much more, dare I say, and I usually don't like this word, but whimsical kind of like approach to how it presents things. It's just offbeat enough, though. Maybe that's just that Wes Anderson tone that you were mentioning. Just enough of that, just to make me feel like no. It's weird enough for me. It's not just whimsy. It's like off kilter whimsy. I can get on board with that more.
It's a dude who like was absolutely made fun of in high school, but he's owned it. Like he's absolutely made it his own thing.
For sure, yeah. And the main character, Preble, like, the performance that he has, and it fits very much into this type of movie, is this character who, like, is just kind of like going through the motions of the world around him, doesn't really feel that connected to what he's involved in. If you ask him if he likes his job and he likes his life, he'll sort of shrug and go, yeah, it's all right. But there's also, like, I guess a really good example is early on in the film, he's at the drive-thru, and he's ordering some food, and he's told of this new item, and he says, no, I don't want that, just give me my usual thing. But then at the end, he just kind of really, like, sadly and pathetically goes, oh, and I'll try a chicken shake. Like, he just adds it on at the end, and this really exasperated, like, oh, I know I'm pathetic. I know I'm so pathetic for ordering this, but I want it so bad.
I mean, I agree with that, but I also think that a major part of what this movie builds on is not just the disillusionment of people, but also the realization that you have been disillusioned.
Yes.
Like, it's this thing where you all of a sudden snap out of the fog and you're like, oh God, was it really that bad this whole time?
Yeah, that's there, and he's kind of this perfect like conduit for that, because he's just kind of like he's like a walking ghost almost, with the way he just kind of like interacts with the world about him. And a big part of the film is that through the story, he kind of like, oh, life can actually mean something. There's love, there's laughter, there's rainbows in the sky. It doesn't all have to be miserable.
There's dolphins in the sea. There's dolphins in the sky. There's dolphins everywhere.
It's actually describing a scene from this movie, what David just said, believe it or not. But that's more to the point. We'll get to that later. I did it. I liked how it looked visually. They add on like some specs and stuff. They want to give it like an older film kind of aesthetic. I don't know how you felt about that. I don't mind when movies do that, as long as they don't overdo it too much. I mean,
yeah, I think it's the question of if it's super obviously shot digitally, like, something from like early 2000s era, where like before they really learned how to make digital stuff look like film, then I'd have more of a problem with it. But this one, it mimics it well enough. I didn't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah, it's not something that bugs me, and I like how film looks. So if you want to emulate film, I'm not really going to be that mad about it. It's got that level of absurdity, and I think kind of that like intentionally lo-fi effects, and even it's got a bit of a retro future thing going on as well, because it's like, okay, it's the future, and it's kind of a world that we're very similar. Nothing's that unrecognizable, and yet the old version of the Dream recordings is VHS, which, given that it doesn't exist yet, you would think, oh, the first version of this would still be something that would be quite slick by today's standards, but it's not. It's VHS. Now, admittedly, the real world reason for this is that it was probably very easy to get a lot of old VHS tapes that they could like pull apart and destroy, and no one would give a shit. But
I mean, I don't know. I kind of got the vibe that this was like an alternate reality, because at one point they say that the Dream recordings tech, like the current gen stuff, was made mandatory. I think it was like 7 years ago.
which would be 2028.
Right, but you would think there would have to be a whole period before that of like evolving technologies and whatnot.
You
and
would
to say
think.
that only happened in like at the time of this movie's making, 2021, that would only be like 6 years.
Yeah, 6-7 years. I mean, you could say, oh, let's say they introduced it in 2022. Gen 1 with the VHS tapes is like lasts like 6-7 years, and then they introduced the fancy new one that just records everything digitally. Like,
Yeah,
you know, it kind of
suppose it's
works.
feasible.
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I don't want to talk about anything that's in the movie though. I don't want to spoil anything because
Right.
it does go places. So I think we're probably going to go into spoilers here quite quickly. But is there anything else you'd like to add before we do go further in?
I mean, we listed off the actors. We didn't really talk about them, though. I think there isn't really a bad performance in this movie. I'm hesitant to say that anybody did a super standout job. I will say that I've already forgotten his name here. Preble. I was going to say Pleble. Preble does a good job of being the everyman, but because he is this everyman character, he kind of doesn't have any major standout moments either. But I think no character in this is poorly acted by any means.
No, although that said, some people will hate the acting in this, and I think this is a disconnect that I think people who will criticize the acting in this won't realize they're going for exactly what they're hitting, which is they want it to feel a little bit offbeat. They want the acting to feel like they're not real people. They do feel like they're in like a dreamlike world that feels a little bit off and stilted. And I think people who aren't used to art house movies will see that and go, "This acting's terrible." And I like, no, this is exactly what they're going for. I don't think there's anything like you can not like it. That's one thing, but I don't think you can say that this is because it's bad acting.
Yeah, certain characters in this have a very community theater sort of aspect to them, but it feels entirely intentional with everything else going on around them.
Absolutely, yeah, it's completely what they're going for. So, yeah. All right, I'll just have to say spoilers because there's not much we can say without just giving things away. So we'll get into it. Strawberry Mansion spoilers, you have been warned, but I recommend it. It's only like 95 minutes, so it's not like it's a huge time sink if you're going to check it out.
And totally free, apparently, on YouTube, so go for it.
Yeah. So, the movie opens with, and it's not a surprise, obviously this is a movie where there's going to be a lot of dream sequences because the whole premise is dreams. But it starts out in like a pink room. It's like, and when I say it's a pink room, I don't just mean the walls are pink. The cabinets, it's basically like a little kitchen. The cabinets are pink, the counters are pink, the table's pink. Like, they've clearly got a bunch of cheap stuff in terms of the real world here and building the set, and they've just painted it all pink. Yeah. So it's absurdly pink. And the guy is just sitting there. It's the main character, Preble. He's just sitting, and the premise of this dream is that he gets hungry, get the munchies, he goes to the fridge and there's nothing there, and he looks really sad, and he starts holding his stomach, and it's
his face doubled over in hunger, just this is the worst thing to happen.
And then Buddy, which is what he's credited as, shows up at the door, and he holds up a bucket of chicken and a bottle of Red Rocket Cola. Is that a real cola?
It is not.
It is not, okay. I just thought maybe it looked a cheap American brand that I wasn't familiar with. But
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tried to sell it at some point, but it's not a major one.
But he holds up this stuff, and he's like, "Don't worry," and he's like, "Oh, my angel has arrived with my bucket of chicken and my cola." Yes.
Oh, yeah, and it's specifically held out like a brand deal sort of way. Like the logo is perfectly visible on both the bottle and the chicken.
And what's so funny about this is obviously this gets elaborated on a lot more as the movie goes on. But I think this opening, and especially since once the character wakes up and he goes to like this place, this Buddy Clucks or whatever the chicken place is called, and he orders
Captain Kelly.
Captain Kelly, there you go. He goes and gets basically a bucket of chicken with a drink, and the joke here as well is that they've got a chicken shake, and he's like, "What's a chicken shake?" And they're like, "Well, it's a chicken and gravy all mushed together into like
They pureed a bucket of chicken and they just put it in a cup. That's all they did.
All I could think was, is this kind of like a cup of what astronauts get in those tubes when they're like eating meals because all the food has to be contained like that?
Yeah, I mean, when he asks what is the chicken shake, and they show a little visual demonstration of it pouring into a cup, and it seems about that consistency. So I wouldn't be surprised. So
I'm like, okay, fair enough. And that's what I was referring earlier. We're at the end of he's like, no, just give me a bucket of chicken and give me the red cola. and he just sits there and goes, "Oh, and I'll try the chicken shake," just with a bit of shame, just a hint of shame in his voice as he says it. But
why not? I'll do it.
So at this point, I like that. Obviously, it goes on later because I got this idea again with the second time he dreams. Like I really got the idea. Okay, no, this is product placement in their dreams, right? And that's obviously a very sci-fi way to go. But even before that, though, I thought if it's not going that way, I was thinking here. I already like what they're doing here with this idea that he dreams about a thing. So then he has to go and get it. Because I thought what this could have been doing is less setting up a science fiction thing and more just really setting up a character thing that his life is so goddamn mundane that he's dreaming of a bucket of chicken and then has to satisfy the craving by going to get this fast food bucket of chicken. So
yeah, I was definitely thinking this is, a future where advertising is so prevalent in just everyone's lives, everyone's like waking lives, in that it literally invades your dreams whether you want it to or not. Like it's just automatically like, oh yeah, that's, I walked by 700 Starbucks today, therefore my dream will have Starbucks in it no matter what.
That seems to be what he's assuming as well, because it actually turns out to be a secret that they're literally beaming ads into people's dreams. That's like the conspiracy that we find out about later on. So by the time that comes up, I'd already figured out, and I think most people would, oh, this is product placement that's been beamed into people's heads. But the fact that he doesn't know, and that seemingly no one knows except the evil ad agency and maybe the government because they're behind it, is like, oh, okay, this is a surprise to them, and they were just sort of like, oh, I guess I see that on TV all the time. It must just be, creeping in, but on its own. Nope, they're and it's not a far-fetched thing. If they can record your dreams and, as we see later on, tax you depending on the items or things that appear in your dream. It's not that wild to suggest that they're also beaming shit into them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was actually, you said you see it later, and we get more of an explanation later, but I do really like this opening sequence where we get them eating the chicken, and like, I cannot overstress, there's this moment of like sheer companionship that they sell, where like, Preble's like got his hand on Buddy's shoulder, Buddy's got his hand on his shoulder, and Buddy's just like, whatever you need, I'll always be there. I'm a friend. I'm here. And then he wakes up and it's like, all right, bit on the nose. But as he wakes up, he goes and there's this little machine next to him. He walks over to this iPad he has mounted on a shelf, and he just plugs it in. And you can see the tax form being filled out on screen saying like, oh, yep, you've got this, you got this, you got this. All right, there you go. Filed your dream tax. And it's like, immediately you see the words dream tax on the paper. And you're like, I'm sorry. What is this? What are we doing?
Yeah, obviously you see that tally. What I was referring to is later on when he's actually auditing the dreams, you actually see like he's in the dreams looking at the items, and you see a little pop-up saying, "Oh, here's a clarinet that costs $2,000, tax 42 cents," and I'm like, well. Okay, the tax rate's not terrible, but still, you're paying 42 cents because an instrument showed up in your dream? Who's this money going to? What's going on here?
Absolutely the government, 100%.
Because I was thinking, is it if anything branded shows up? Of course, this is before they confirmed or heavily implied that it was product placement. I was like, oh, the chicken place is going to keep taxing them because he keeps dreaming of their chicken and it's their logo. So they have to get a cut of that. Cycle.
They take the tax money, put it more into ads. They see the ads in their dreams, get the tax money.
Yeah,
perfect.
So what's good about it is that every single thought I had that was wrong, and then the thing that actually is happening, anything they could have picked out of that all still worked in the idea of this dystopia where everything's being overly taxed and abused by the system.
Yeah, no, this movie, like you said, in the first half, it is following the character, and it lays down a few little mysteries to start with, but ultimately we are still just following the character as he goes to audit this woman. But as soon as you hit that second half, the symbolism for like, what does the main character represent? What does the woman in the dreams represent? What do the ads themselves represent? Everything is symbolic of something in a much larger sense.
Yeah, and I'm not going to claim that I got a solid idea of what everything represents.
I feel like I did, but that's kind of what I want to talk through. But we'll get there.
Yeah, we can discuss that. Because but obviously there's a lot of quirks. It's a big house, right? It's not quite a mansion, but obviously it's a big house. And when he goes up,
I think it is the Strawberry Mansion. Like it's painted.
Oh no, it is. Yeah,
strawberry colors. So I guess it's a mansion.
I mean, I wouldn't call this a mansion, but yeah, for the sake of the title of the movie, it is the Strawberry Mansion. I think it's the idea that there's more inside than there is room. You know, like there's more inside a person than there is space.
Theming. Got it.
See? Very good. So he knocks on the door, and she answers the door like Doc Brown in Back to the Future with like a light thing on her head. Yes. That's immediately what I thought of.
Future boy?
And he says, "Oh, I'm here to see, what's her name, Bella. Is she here?" Or I think he says her full name, but yeah, Bella's what she wants to go by. And she's like, "Oh, I'll go get her." And then she just comes back herself with her hat off, or light up hat off. But we see, much like a gangster would be hiding a gun behind their back, she is hiding a strawberry ice cream cone behind her back.
Yeah. So I couldn't immediately tell what that was behind her back, and I thought for sure we were gonna get her like stabbing this dude or like trying to. And then all of a sudden, like, she's like, "Oh, well, if you want to get into my house, you got to lick the ice cream cone." And he's like, I'm not gonna do that. And she just keeps pushing him until finally he does. And that's when we finally get the title popping up.
The title comes up as he, in slow motion, ultra close up, licks the strawberry ice cream, which they lit in such a way that it actually glistens really, like, more than I would expect ice cream to glisten, honestly. Yeah. The lens flare that's popping off this thing is unnatural.
It's a dream, Pete. It's a dream ice cream cone.
It's not a dream yet. This is still reality.
Yes. Or is it? I don't. By the time we hit the end of this, I don't know anymore.
So he comes in, and you know, it's like he's here at the auditor, and he's like, "Hey, we've got no tax records for you in the last 7 years, so that's 7 years of dreams to audit." And unfortunately for him, she's like, "Yeah, I didn't upgrade to the new system." And he's like, "But that became mandatory." And she's like, "Oh, that's news to me. Yeah, you know,
I'm just a quirky old lady. Don't mind me." And
he walks in and sees just stacks and stacks of VHS tapes, and he's like, "How many tapes do you have?" And she's like, "Oh, about 2,000. And immediately his heart sinks, and he goes, "Is there a motel nearby? Because this is going to be a multi-day job. I thought I'd get through this in a couple hours, and it's going to take me like a week."
I love it.
Yeah. So,
do you remember the name of the turtle?
Oh, no, I don't.
Do I? I think it's like Sugar Baby or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it was Sugar something. Sugar Doll, Sugar Plum, something like
that. All right, I've got the movie playing. I'll see if it comes up.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, and at this point, I'm like, this is interesting. He's going to be looking through her dreams, and they've got this really shoddy, but in an endearing way, like, prop for like him watching the tapes. It's like a big VR headset, but like you can tell this thing is cheaply made. It looks like it's someone did it with paper mache or something.
Oh, absolutely.
It's pretty wonky. But
it's supposed to look like it's made of like sheet metal, but you can literally see the styrofoam cups that it was clearly just jammed in there.
But it kind of works, and there's like a hose going from that to like this ancient VCR. It's like, all right, whatever. Well, it's quirky. I like it, and we see like just the first example of him, you know, going into one of her memories, and it's presented as him standing in the memory, but he's in like I would describe it as he's kind of like a ghost, but it's like a ghost made up of video effect. Like he's got scan lines and stuff.
It's a digital, like just he's very obviously not in the scene. He's very obviously just a onlooker and a spectator for whatever the dream is going on here.
He's observing, he's tallying things, and we see that she dreams as herself as a younger woman, you know, maybe in her like 20s or something like that. And I'm like, okay, this makes some sense, I guess. I guess maybe as you get older, you sort of dream as yourself in your prime as opposed to your older version. Or whatever. I mean, there was one point where I was thinking, are some of these tapes secretly from like decades ago, and like this is actually a dream she was having when she was that age? But nah, I mean, it's pretty clear that these are all just tapes from the last 7 years.
But it does seem like they may be like somewhat recurring dreams as well. Things that she dreams pretty often. Yeah,
because this dream is like her like seeing her father, and he's playing like a little horn, and there's just other random little things going on. But
there's a giant wounded buffalo that he puts his arm into and pulls out a dandelion.
I forgot about that. There's a lot of weird details here that I will have forgotten because they are just very sort of blink and you'll miss them and they never come up again. It's not like the recurring themes or anything like that. But there is a moment though where he's looking over at her and it's like she's looking back at him, and she's not really, but he like for a second he's like, wait, is she looking at me? And she's not. But of course my mind immediately went racing of like, oh, where's this movie going? Are we going to get some weird stuff where like she starts seeing him in her dreams, even though they're recordings of her dreams she had before. Like where
we're gonna get that moment where the head snaps to the side and just be like, I see you.
Yeah, like I my mind was racing with stuff. And in between, this and the next time he goes in, like there's a little bit more with him and the old lady, where I don't know if it's like right after this dream, but she's like sitting right behind him on the bed at one point, and like we see her sitting there, and like he's gonna get scared shitless when he takes that helmet off and sees her sitting there, and sure enough, yeah, he nearly has a heart attack because this old woman's just sitting there.
She gives him like a burger or something, says like, oh, you gotta eat, keep your food up, and he's like, okay, please leave, and he just closes the door behind her, and she's like, oh god, this is gonna be the worst.
And this is right before he thinks he hears a spider tell him to dream of itself.
It's a fly in a spider's web.
It's a fly in a spider web. Yes. Which does kind of come back later. I don't know how to explain this part, to be honest, but that's
the
for later.
Fly is saying, hey, they're trying to kill you. You need to dream of me. And then Preble's like, all right, clearly there's a carbon monoxide leak or something in here. I need to go to bed.
I don't think you should just go to bed if you think there's a carbon monoxide leak. That seems like a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's probably
that is one other thing. Back when he does his first interview with the old woman, he asks, what was your occupation? Like when you were still working, what did you do? And she goes off on this long little thing of like, oh, I write, I do music. Sometimes I do photography. I paint occasionally. I would really call myself a atmospheric creator or something like that. And he just writes down artist and moves on.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. It also, I think, sets up some themes for the movie, that she is this sort of free spirit who appreciates all these things and wants to love everything, and he just doesn't know how to comprehend this enthusiasm or this creativity. And just kind of, because I mean, look at his dream versus hers. He always dreams of the exact same pink kitchen. Like it's the exact same thing every time, and the same loser comes in. In fact, we might even get the second dream somewhere around here where like he shows up, and what is it he needs this time?
It's he goes into the which dream are you talking about? Her dream or his dream?
No, his dream where he's wanting the toothpaste, and the guy.
The toothpaste isn't until much later.
Is that much later? Okay.
That's after he gets the helmet. This one is he goes in and they're covered in spider webs, and the other guy, Buddy, he's got spider.
That's what it was. Yeah, it was the bug spray.
Spraying it, but then all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, and Buddy's like, "Don't answer it. I didn't hear anything. Don't go over to the door." And eventually Buddy goes to answer it, and he stonewalls whoever's there. It turns out, as we find out later, it's young Bella who's kind of invading the dream.
Yeah, but you can kind of tell in this scene. You see like a glimpse of her head. You can, you know, it's not actually surprising later on that it's young Bella, but you get this idea that young Bella is entering his dreams. Not that the woman specifically is doing that, just that he is dreaming of the young version of Bella that he has seen in the dream recordings. And you can read that as he's starting to kind of fall for the young version of her, which is an interesting sci-fi concept, given that young version doesn't exist anymore. It's the old lady now. So that's kind of weird in its own way. But even if you take the romantic side out of it, it's like, oh, it's this idea of someone who represents this creativity, this freedom, all these things that, you know, the man doesn't want you dreaming about. The man wants you to be dreaming about bug spray, and then the Buddy's spraying the bug spray, and he's like, "I'll have some of this chicken that I got from that chicken place you like, as well as I'm spraying the bug spray."
Bug spray brought to you by Chicken Place.
And I'm like, man, your hands are so greasy as you're doing stuff. Even when Preble was eating his chicken that he got at the drive-thru earlier on, and he started pressing buttons on his car radio, I'm like, oh no, your fingers are so greasy right now. Like, movies always ignore how greasy your hands get.
Peter, that's not movies. That's just Americans. We just do that.
That's disgusting. No. You can't touch anything when you're eating chicken with your hands.
Look, if you tried to go about your daily life in America worrying about grease on your fingers, you'd never do anything. You just sit there staring at your fingers all day.
All right, okay. This is the dystopia of all. So there's that. There's also like so the next main dream that's important though is that once again he's looking at one of her dreams. In this dream, she's in like a little restaurant and she's talking to the waiter who's got like a big frog's head.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
This is
he plays the saxophone.
Who also plays the saxophone, and you know there's some extras around at the other tables and whatnot. There's a bird flying around, and there's a really nice moment here where our main character chooses to sit in the chair across from her, further indicating that he's starting to have some kind of like feelings for this young version of Bella that he really quite likes.
Yeah, he's had his little notepad out throughout all this, but this is the first time where he just tucks it into his pocket and sits down. Like, he's not actually taxing her right now. He's just enjoying the dream.
But then, like, the bird that's flying around, like, lands on the chair where he's sitting. So there's this moment where she looks him right in the eye. She's actually looking at the bird, and it does this thing where he flickers for a second, and we can see the bird. It's this really nice little moment of, like, just like, oh, he's like a ghost in her dream. Or he's like, or they're all ghosts to him because he's the one that's living, and this is a dream from the past. You know, there's a nice little quality to it.
Right.
But during this, there's a weird moment, though, where there appears to be buckets of chicken on all the tables. That's what everyone in the restaurant is eating. But there's like a glitch where the actual bucket is like all just, you know, digital gobbledygook noise, right?
Yeah, just static.
Right? Just scan lines, things like that. And he's like, that's very strange. And obviously in this moment, I was like, is his like dreams, like, because he always dreams about the chicken starting to invade? Is that what's going on here? Obviously it's not. Right. It kind of becomes clear when he brings this up to old Bella. He's like, hey, I was looking at this dream and like there was this sort of glitch and it was like something was missing. And she proposes, well, maybe it was something that wasn't meant to be there. And it brings us to this idea that, yes, they are putting product placements in her dreams, but she's been wearing that bright colored helmet thing, which she designed with her late husband, to block that. So what's happened in that dream basically is that she was censoring the product placement. Like, they were trying to beam it into her head, and the recording doesn't show it because she successfully said no. Yeah. So, like, he's
they get to it, but they basically have made ad block for dreams.
Yes.
They have managed to come up with that.
So our main guy's like, oh no, that can't be. We're like, they're not beaming ads into her. That's not possible. They wouldn't be doing that. It's like, are you sure? Like, think about it, really. And of course, like, obviously after this, next time he dreams, which isn't right away, but whenever he does, like, he does start to notice, like, buddies showing up. Oh, you need toothpaste? Here's some toothpaste. Have some of the toothpaste.
Well, yeah, he goes to bed and he decides to put on the helmet just to give it a shot. He's like, all right, well, let's just see what happens. What can we do?
Yeah, and Buddy shows up, it starts glitching out and, like, can't quite, like,
yeah, he's trying to get in, but the door is locked, and he eventually just stands outside the room, and he's like, hey, I see you need toothpaste. I've got a fresh one right here. Why don't you let me in? I'll give you the toothpaste. He's
outside the window trying to, like, just to taunt him, like, hey, let me in. Let me in. You know, and eventually Preble kind of wakes up and, like, sort of, like, realizes that this is working, or he looks at the helmet or whatever, and it's a whole thing. But you know, we're kind of building up to, like, where we're getting to here, but, like, there's also a scene around here where he has lunch with Bella, and this gets a little bit into her personal life, and she talks about how she had a first husband who wasn't very nice, and that's who she had a son with, and unfortunately that son, unfortunately named Pierre, is just as much of a monster as his father. And I'm like, okay, that feels important. They're setting that up, so maybe that'll come up later. It does. But she got a second husband who was very nice. He's passed away, but so it sets up some
Jim. But yeah,
sets up some personal life, some personal history. That's important. And then after this whole, like, test where he's used this helmet and he's sort of, like, realized, oh, she's telling the truth, they're doing this. He has this kind of, like, you know, campfire, well, not campfire, it's indoors, but, you know, the fireplace conversation where he's like, all right, you know, you wanted me to see this and know this. Like, what do I do with this information that they're doing this? And she's like, honestly, that's up to you. That's, you know, that's for you to decide what to do with that. But, like, someone needed to know. And like, it's just kind of this thing, but it does have this kind of tone to it, which when he wakes up the next morning and discovers her dead body, I was like, oh, I think she knew that was her, like it's like she's passed on this information and she's ready to go kind of thing.
She specifically says, you and I have a longer history than you know, and she passes over a VHS tape that is marked with a star on it, and she makes it out. She doesn't directly say anything, but she's like, watch this, and it's important that you see this tape. It is vitally crucial. And I think that it is this, I don't want to say it's her, you know, accepting her death or whatever, but I do think, like you said, it's her realizing, I've done what I needed to do. I've passed on this knowledge to someone else, and therefore I'm okay with leaving.
Yeah, and the tape's got a star on it just so we can always recognize that it's that tape at a glance. So he does like try and watch this tape, not that night, but like,
yeah. Well, the next morning he wakes up, he finds her dead, and we get the whole sequence of him just like calling the police, getting his testimony taken. He goes around, he feeds the turtle, he feeds the chicken, and he kind of just mourns for a minute, and then he goes to pack up and leave after that.
Yeah, and he basically runs into her son, who shows up and is like, "Oh yeah, my mom died. She was here. You must be the guy from the Dream IRS, whatever it's called."
I think it's just the IRS. He says it's the bureau, so I'm assuming.
That sounds like something that they probably expanded on, but maybe took out for time. Is like just like what exactly this organization is, and like, is it just the IRS or is it a specific sub branch with their own acronym?
Like, this is absolutely the sort of thing that if this said like produced by J.J. Abrams, it would have a full ARG online with like hidden websites and stuff like that.
And clearly, you know, we have already, like, they intentionally let us hear Bella's opinion of this man before we met him. So we immediately we're on guard, we're waiting for him to, you know, do something or say something. And he does feel very dismissive. He says, "Oh yeah, she was a wonderful woman." But then immediately just quickly changes the subject. Like, he's just ready to start prying. It's like, "Hey, you know, she was delusional those last few years, right? Like, you know, she didn't tell you anything, did she?" Like, just, you know, kind of prodding. And, you know, the main character, Preble, kind of says, "I don't think she was delusional. I didn't get the idea." He kind of sticks up for her a little bit. You know, he kind of shows his admiration for her. But the son, Peter, says, "Look, why don't, you know, my wife and son are coming up. Why don't you stay around and we'll have dinner before you leave tonight?" And he sort of like talk about, you know, my mother or whatever. And he's like, "Okay, I guess we can do that."
But then he goes upstairs and he decides to play the star tape. And we get to see what was so important about that is that it is a dream of a date between young Bella and a man in a ghillie suit. And we have seen
Is that what you call
ghillie
that?
suits. Yeah, it's you know, for anyone who doesn't know, ghillie suit is like a bunch of grass and moss stuff to make people blend into their environment.
And we also see a version of that in this where it's actually videotape instead of grass. Yeah.
Yep, but this one is grass as well. And they have a date and they're embracing or whatnot. And as he's watching this, Peter comes up and interrupts and is just like, "Hey, my family's here. You wanna come on down?"
We don't get to see the end, and even the second time he tries to watch it in a bit, we don't quite get to see the end either. We get a little tease. We don't actually get to see the full thing until the end of the movie, which I'm glad they did, because obviously the second half of the movie gets so crazy with the dream stuff that when he put the tape on it again, I was like, "Oh, thankfully," because I could not have told you it was on that tape that started all this journey. I could not have told you if you didn't remind me again at the end. So I was very pleased for that. But like you say, Peter interrupts because, "Oh, it's dinner time." I'm like, "Oh, that was quick. All right." And I have to. So we did a movie for Extra Reels called The Last Vampire on Earth, where the main character was invited over for a family dinner, and like, it was very obvious that the family dinner, it was just like KFC. Obviously the bucket or anything wasn't on screen, but all the plates of food were clearly just chicken from KFC. It really made me laugh that this dinner that this family was having with him was literally just a bucket of chicken from the place.
Oh yeah.
Right?
And the Red Rocket soda.
And the Red Rocket soda, just to further, you know, go along with everything the movie's been doing. And it's intentional here and it's funny, but it was triple funny to me because it made me think of that scene in Last Vampire on Earth where they did it just by accident because they didn't want to like put in the effort of actually having a meal that looked like it was home cooked.
Yeah, it's again that sort of thing where this movie does have this super low budget feel to it. Obviously, they did have a decent, you know, they were able to do stuff, but because they were putting that feel into it, all of a sudden they tripped over this actually low budget film that we have already seen.
I just got a kick out of that. The dinner does not last long, though. In fact, very quickly, it turns into the wife and son have snuck into the other room to start like destroying the VHS tapes. It's like, "Oh, there's something on here we don't want you to find." And at this point in the movie, like when she died specifically, somewhere between then and like now, I was thinking, "Oh, is this going to be like an After Yang kind of movie where he discovers more about her by looking into more of the tapes? It's going to be more of a like discovering who this person was kind of film." And it's not quite that either. It does go into its own thing.
Yeah, the way that they play it in the movie is they specifically say, look, it's tricky when somebody dies mid-audit, but we do have a specialized team for that. They're going to continue with the audit, and we're going to see what happens. But, like, technically, I'm done here. But you can see from his reaction, he kind of wants to stick around. Like, he comes into the next room, and they're destroying the tapes. He says he's upset because they just committed a federal crime, which I'm sure he is upset about, but he's also upset because he cares about this woman and he wanted to see what was on the remainder of those tapes as well.
Yeah, you're destroying not her life per se, but you're destroying her dreams, which sounds really like nasty when you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's almost like this is a critique on certain political and capitalist systems.
I don't know what you said, David. I didn't get any of that.
That was definitely...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a dystopian movie. The entire idea of taxing your dreams is dystopian already. Never mind the idea that they're ruining and taking away your dreams, which, yeah, and obviously, every time the son talks to him, it's like, oh, but your work's done here, though, right? Like, you're done. And he's like, yeah, but we still have to audit. Oh, everything's fine. Like, these tapes belong to us now. It's like, well, no, this is a federal crime. This is basically tax records you're shredding here.
Right.
So this is a problem. And that kind of motivates what's going to happen. Because I was like thinking, wait, is this guy violent? Like, we know he's not a nice person, but is he a violent person? Like, where are we going with this? And probably the biggest mistake Preble makes in the movie is that when he goes up the stairs after this like confrontation, he immediately puts on the helmet to watch more of that tape because he wants to see the rest of it. And of course, he doesn't really get to see much of it here because Peter sneaks up behind him with a bowling pin and hits him in the head, interrupting the thing.
In fairness, he hits him on the giant sheet metal viewing thing that he's got over his head, but somehow, yes, that injures his direct head.
It does hit him again afterwards, though, directly to the head.
That is true. The one thing that he does end up seeing just before the tape goes out is...
just a glimpse. You can get a glimpse of this.
During their date, we see young Bella is removing the face off of the ghillie suit, like pulling away the grass, and it turns out to be Preble. It's him inside the ghillie suit. And we also see the little like transparent version of him that's just spectating the dream, and he's like, what? What is going on here? And that's when he goes into a coma, more or less. Yeah,
because I was like, okay, I'm not surprised they did this. I expected some wonkiness of like, okay, we're going to completely shake up. Like, we've established the rules. We've established that he can observe. If it wasn't for the line she had about, oh, our past goes further back than you think, I wouldn't have like thought this was like a dream where she thought of him before she met him. I would have assumed this was like a dream she had after she met him that she wanted him to see because, oh, hey, you're in my dream, right? But because of that line of dialogue, it does kind of murky up and make me think, oh, wait, is she suggesting that this dream is older than that, you know?
Yeah, I didn't even consider that. I just assumed... it's probably because they're on VHS tapes. I just assumed every one of these tapes is at least like 5 years old minimum.
No, because you see when you see, well, one, they still have to record their dreams every night, and she's still using this tech. But you specifically see it happen to his dream because he wakes up after he's had the dream the first night there, and you see like the tape pop out of the machine next to the bed. So so it's still functioning. This is still how she's recording dreams, and even he, like, I'm like, wait, if you have like a spare bedroom, do you have to have a spare dream recording machine for any guests that come over because everyone needs to have their dreams recorded every night?
I'd imagine there's a travel size version of it that people would bring with them whenever they go on trips.
Yeah, but this is clearly hers because this is the big VHS number. This isn't the modern fancy one that he's got.
I don't know. This movie does not decide to spend time on how does the tech work or anything like that. No. They're just like, here it is. It is the dream sharing device from Inception. Doesn't matter how it works. Just go for it.
Yeah, and to its credit, despite the fact that it's not obsessed with the science and the mechanics, I do think it sets things up in a way up until this point of like being really consistent. These are the rules. This is how it works. I mean, maybe not how the science works, but this is how it can be used. This is how it operates with the user. And, you know, like just playing with that. And then interest in the idea that, okay, there's stuff being inserted into the dreams. And it basically sets up this idea, you know, like the idea... I mean, she doesn't say this when she's alive, but like I think the younger version says it, like in his head when he's dreaming afterwards. Is like, yeah, his mission now is like, oh, you've got like a noble thing to do now. You know that they're doing this when they're not supposed to be. You can do something about it. Now, what that is, I knew the movie was never going to answer that. The movie's going to leave it off where, yeah, he might fix this after. He might be motivated to go and try and take on the system and show more people that this is happening and get something done about it. But the movie's not going to be about him doing that. The movie's more just about him wanting to do that, him having the fire to go and like you know, do that.
I mean, the second half of the movie, from the point where he's hit over the head with a bowling pin, is almost entirely just in his comatose dream sequence. It is 100% following him trying to get back out to reality, but also not really having the drive to do that in the first place.
Yeah, because he's not actually trying to get back out to reality for most of it. He's trying to find young Bella, because he sees young Bella early on in this dream, once he's hit over the head. But then once that part's over, it's all about him trying to find her again, and she's the one that has to convince him to leave. And I think it's very open to the audience and ambiguous. Is this just him dreaming of like his version of young Bella, or in some way like has the real like spirit or dream of Bella actually come into his dreams? The movie never actually gives you anything to think that's what's actually happening beyond just the idea of like it's so sweet and hopeful that maybe even if it isn't, the idea that she's like connected with him enough and inspired him enough that he's dreaming of her like this.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, you could also make the argument that they're both the same young Bella, because both of them are just figments in a dream. It's like if you dream of a red balloon and I dream of a red balloon, who's to say that it's not the same red balloon, you know?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird though, because like you're getting into this thing where, like, is the version of me that I dream about, if I'm having a dream, is that really me? Is it just based on me? Is that any more valid than a version of me that you might dream about?
Well, I would personally not like to be held liable for Dreamy's crimes, so I'm going to say that it's a different version.
Very good, very good. So, because basically, what the movie is from this point is that, you know, we get a little bit, we'll talk about what the dreams are in a minute, but like, we get a little bit of him dreaming, and then he's kind of coming to, and that's when Peter hits him over the head again with the bowling pin. And then we see him sort of like be vaguely conscious at one point, and Peter sets the curtains on fire. And from that point on, the movie from there is like, will he wake up in time to save himself from being trapped inside a house that's on fire? And it's all about inside his conscience, young Bella try to convince him, at least once he gets to her anyway, of like, no, you should wake up. You've got something to do. You have to stop them from doing this. You have to, you know, whatever. And there's some fun things to kind of like, but there's also a couple of weird elements where they try and tie in stuff that happened earlier on in the movie in the real world, where that was influenced by the dream that he's having now. And that's where I'm like, okay, I don't really know what we're getting at with that. Like that,
you get some weird time loop stuff where the dream happened in the real world beforehand, and we see how like things that were absolutely 100%, as far as the movie presented, real world sequences are directly influenced by the dream world activities. Like they couldn't have happened without the dream world interfering. So it gets real messy towards the end.
Yeah, but again, I think that's more symbolic than it is literal. But it definitely goes in that kind of place. So that's kind of what we're doing. And the dream stuff from this last half basically boils down into a couple of sections. The first section is when Bella comes to, because he basically wakes up into a dream, but he's still in the house, and Peter's head's turned into that of a wolf, which I guess, you know, big bad wolf, that kind of thing, right? Wolf in sheep's clothing.
Also that song Peter and the Wolf, which is pretty famous.
Never heard of it, but fair enough. And he's chasing him around the house, and it's like he's in danger, and young Bella ends up being there, and like, you know, he's like, oh, we have to hide in the closet. And it's like, we can get out of here, but you're going to have to swim. And he's like, we're in a closet. What do you mean swim? And then you get probably the first fantastical shot of the movie is this shot of him falling through the sky into the ocean. It's just this big wide shot. And this first portion of this extended like second half of the movie is like him and Bella living on like an island, like Castaway, and he narrates it and says, "Oh, the dream was or this life was magical. We played games in the sand. We got fruit and veg from beneath the sand. There's dolphins in the sky, dolphins in the ocean. Like, you know, just this tranquil."
I love the way that they set up that sequence though, because he's just like, yeah, we had everything we needed. We had fresh coconut water, and you're just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You can get a constant supply of that. And he's like, and there were fruits and veggies buried in the sand. And you see just like perfectly ripe bell peppers and bananas and carrots that he's just digging out of scooped holes that like they were buried by a toddler. And then like we see the fishing boat. Yeah, absolutely. We see a fishing boat just off to the sea, just a tiny little rickety thing, and then she pulls in like a 30-pound marlin, just holding it up, just like, hey, yeah, great.
Yeah, it's this, this dreamlike thing, and it's almost this idea that now that he's actually starting to dream for real, and he's dreaming about things that he actually wants to be in, like, he might be tempted to just not leave, and it'll be the death of him, because he won't wake up and he won't, save himself.
Yeah, and then this is where we also get, like, other weird things where, in that weird timey-wimey way, we see that an earlier dinner that they had, that when she first said, the dreams are maybe not your own sort of stuff, there were 2 beets on his plate, and one of them jumped to the side all of a sudden, and also he heard a whistling noise. And we see that because this is dream logic, they're like, yeah, we did everything on the island. We had fun, played games. One time we turned into beets and went back to our first dinner together. So then you just see them grafted onto the beets as they are there, and he whistles at himself in the earlier scene.
Yeah, it was kind of weird though, because like, I don't know if, because you phrased that earlier as, oh, there's things that happened in the real world that couldn't have happened without being affected by the dreams. I don't know if I'd read it like that. I would read it more that he has these weird moments that sort of turn into dream deja vu. Like, I don't know if I would take it literal that he like the beat really moved on the plate. Like, I would question how valid that was even in the real world at the time, because it was like a weird little moment where, almost like you have a little moment of like, oh, did I just see that thing? Because he definitely didn't see a fly talking to him, even though he thinks he did.
No, that's fair. So you're thinking that he saw or heard something, if we're talking about the fly or the whistling or whatever.
Yes.
He saw or heard something, and then when he gets into the dream, this is the explanation of what he saw and heard.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, how him falling as a comet into the strawberry ice cream cone to make sure that everything plays out like it should, I don't know what that represents, but I will say this, it's the most epic scene I've ever seen in a movie.
I want everyone to stop this right now. And I want you to just sit on what Pete said and question how we get there. Anybody who can guess in the comments below, no cheating, how we get to the comet falling out of the sky into the ice cream cone, you win 10 points.
And Preble himself is the comet, like his face is on the comet.
Yes, Preble is the comet that lands in his own ice cream cone that he then licks from the beginning of the movie. Moving on.
There's magic in those ice cream cones, because it literally has space dust in it.
Yep, absolutely. So they're chilling on a beach, and all of a sudden Preble's head starts bleeding, and then we see Buddy pop up, and he starts presenting an ad read, and he's just like, new double strength, bye now. And immediately Bella starts freaking out. She's just like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here, they're gonna try to kill you.
Yeah, and he ends up on a boat, of course. How does she disappear again here? I forget.
Well, before they get to that, I mean, I think that it is important to note that this is where we get the full explanation as to like everything about Peter and all this other stuff going on as well.
Oh yeah, he's like the head of the advertising company. Yeah, that does all this stuff, and that's why he's so particularly invested in stopping this from getting out, that they're secretly doing this. So yeah, he's like the villain of the movie. Yeah,
absolutely. So he, as Bella says, you gotta wake up, you gotta wake up. He does wake up, and that's where Peter's standing over and gives him the second wham on the head,
that's when that happens,
and knocks him back out. And now Bella's missing, and he's on a boat with 2 rats.
Humanoid rats.
Yes, wearing sailors' outfits.
Yes, who are his crew. And then time passes, and again, this goes with dream logic, where sometimes a dream feels like it lasts years, even though obviously it doesn't. Where he's lying there, probably building up to the fire starting at this point, and he's like, yes, we spent years on the sea looking for Bella. I still, sometimes I get tested and I lose hope, but I must remain faithful. I must remain hopeful that we'll find her one day. And there's even a point where his rat crew are like, hey, sir, no disrespect, but I don't think we're ever going to find Bella.
It's just not going to happen. And then that's when all of a sudden he starts getting like, I don't want to say Lynchian, because like you said, this doesn't quite go that sort of route, but there's a giant ass demon out in the water that lifts his boat up, and then all of a sudden things just start getting weird.
Well, that's when the fire starts, because it's oh wait, no, it's not when the fire starts, is it?
No, yeah, Peter leaves, he lights the fire, and then he walks out, and that's when the demon shows up.
Yeah, because his feet are on, well, his feet aren't on fire yet, but he he basically, the demon has like a fiery kind of aura around him. That's what it was. Because that's why I was thinking this is when the fire starts, because the fire starts, and then like the giant version and demonic version of the wolf. So it's almost like, again, like when Peter had the wolf head, it's now evolved into this more kind of skeleton face wolf with the hair and all that. And he's, he's kaiju size in the water, picks up the boat, and then we go through this sequence of dreamlike events of him trying to find Bella, and oh god, try to remember the order. This is a nightmare.
I mean, it's literally just like an absolute nightmare sequence, because the rat is like hands him over a compass. The compass is doing the weird glitching thing as well.
Yeah.
Then we get some strange data moshing sequence of one of the rats turning into a chicken, and then the other one decapitating the other one as the colors just like blur out across it. It's a nightmare. Yeah,
it's all pretty crazy. Is there much before he finds Bella again after this? Because he finds her quite quickly.
Yeah, so after the nightmare sequence, he goes and he sits down. He enters a room and he sits down across the table from the wolf demon.
It's like a cabin you'd maybe find in the woods or something like that. It's like a sort of soft lit, and Bella's there, and they're kind of sitting having like an awkward dinner, and like the wolf's like shoving its face with the chicken, I think.
And Bella's the first sequence is Bella's chained up and she's
right
forced to serve drinks, and then all of a sudden the demon just stands up on the table and lets out this ear-shattering scream, which was great for headphones, gotta say. Loved it. But then it turns out that's like a real world bleeding in sort of thing, because that's the smoke alarm going off.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the real world.
Yeah, and I think the symbolism here just a little bit is the idea that Peter is holding his mother's like memory hostage, right? I think that obviously tracks with the idea that he's like holding the tapes, he's destroying the tapes, he's kind of like keeping Pueblo away from her, in a sense,
Right. I mean, I can see it. Yeah.
So you've got that, and then like it gets weird though, because it gets happy again, and it's almost like I think actually before it gets happy, when the smoke starts becoming more of a problem, by this point, because she's okay, sequence of events. She says to him, to get out of here, you have to turn into your caterpillar, right?
Yes,
which he does. And it's amazing how epic this feels as he's describing, like, I traversed the oceans and then I hit the blizzard and I went through the desert.
Him traversing the oceans as a caterpillar is literally him breaching like a whale, like up through the waves and back down again.
Right, and then eventually, like the final sort of biosphere is the snow blizzard, and by that point, though, he's become human again. And I love the touch though that his jacket that he's wearing in this part has that kind of sort of bubbly layered look, which is very caterpillar-esque in its like design. But he finds this little pink house and he goes in, and you realize the interior is that same pink kitchen that he always dreams about. And Buddy's going to show up, and it's going to be kind of that, and it basically gets buried with products, like all these like just plain colored products start falling to, and effectively in the dream he's suffocating from the capitalism as he's suffocating from the smoke in the real world.
I love Buddy just starts screaming at him a little bit, like he's freaking out about it. He's just like, you do know she's crazy, right? You need me. And I love the line here, you don't even know what you want until I give it to you. And Buddy is obviously supposed to represent advertising just as a whole. So the fact of him saying like, I decide what you want, is just so menacing in its own right. And then viewing it in the larger scale makes it so much worse.
Yeah. But it's actually young Bella who comes in and saves him. She pulls him out of the stuff.
It's young Bella, but it turns out it was actually young Bella as the Fly in the web saying that you need to dream of me from earlier in the movie.
Yes, which makes him dream of her, and then she's able to save him in the dream. Now, how the timey-wimey logic of that works, I cannot tell you. I don't have an answer for that, I'm afraid.
Gone. Yep, but she saves him by like unburying him from all the products, but also she brought along the helmet into the dream. So he puts it on, and then Buddy just starts basically seizing. Like he's unable to exist because he's being blocked out.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's almost suggesting that he doesn't need the helmet in real life to block it out. Just the idea that he knows that it's there and that he can block out. So just dreaming of the helmet allowed him to fight off the advertising.
It's the idea of when you are aware of when you're being advertised to, you can just consciously ignore it.
So... yeah, and then it gets really happy here. It's almost like they're getting married, and there's like a whole sequence where Oh, everyone we've encountered is there. So you get the frog waiter, the rats in the sailor outfits, every like side character we've seen throughout.
Like the wolf demon as well. It's also just clapping for them.
And they're going down like this like red carpet almost, like sort of talking to them, waving and shaking hands. And at the end of the place is her son Peter, who acts happy for them and hugs her. And obviously Preble's a little bit standoffish, doesn't know how to take it. And he's like, hey, your ride's here, to go on. And it almost felt like they were going to eat a roller coaster or something, but they actually like stand as a bubble forms around them because bubbles are being blown, and they float off in a bubble. But as they're floating off, he looks down back at Peter again, and Peter, the wolf head comes back, and it's like, oh no, this is menacing. He wants rid of us. This is bad. So the big climax here to the dream stuff in the movie.
All right, pause. Okay. Everyone have their guesses in. Did you figure that one out? Did you figure it was the bubble?
So they're floating in a bubble up into space, and the bad news for them is that they start to separate into two separate bubbles, and then they become comets with their faces are on the front of the comets, and they're soaring through the sky, and she's basically just trying to give them the last bit of advice she can, and it's like, the cone, the strawberry cone. You have to get to the cone, and it's the ice cream cone from the start of the movie.
He's saying that he's melting, and she's like, that's it. To stop you from melting, you gotta go to the ice cream cone.
Yes, and it's almost wrapping all the way back round that having that little treat, that childlike ice cream cone treat, is just there to spark your imagination, like this idea of hopes and dreams, that it's not just, and which is funny in a weird way because I feel like I associate ice cream and stuff like that as part of like marketing and advertising towards kids. I mean, I suppose someone could make their own ice cream and it could be like a heartfelt, like, oh, this is a treat that we made, and it does come across that way from her. It doesn't feel like she's got a tub of Ben and Jerry's in the.
Yeah, I was gonna say if she walked up to him, handed him a tub of Ben and Jerry's, then absolutely this would be Buddy's product. This would be him doing it. But
yeah, but this idea that like it's wrapping back round to that first spark of, hey, you don't have to be this boring, live in this boring dystopia. You can dream a little bit again. And the first spark of that is here. Just have a little treat, have a little ice cream cone before things get started. But yeah, I just like the dramatic music playing as we see him lying in the bed with the flames around him. And then the dramatic music continues as we see his comet with his face on it coming through the sky, and we get the wide shot of it coming down and then landing in the ice cream on the cone. Like, it's absurd, but I can't tell you just how effective it actually is in terms of having a feeling, of having a feeling like, oh, something's been accomplished here, even though it makes no sense.
That's the thing. This movie 100% for this back half operates on dream logic because it is literally all a dream.
Yes.
But it's still it's operating a dream logic in the same way that it's able to get the emotions across. Even if you have a dream that makes absolutely no sense, you still feel the emotions that like the people in the scene would feel.
Yeah. I think it works for two reasons. One is that the real problem with the stakes and the consequences is there, right? And that is that he is lying in a bedroom that is casually and gradually becoming more set alight with the flames. He is in real danger, and this idea that he needs to wake up is a real thing he needs to accomplish if he's got any chance of saving himself. So we can root for that. And this idea that his subconscious isn't ready to do that, and like, you know, the people that he's dreaming about are trying to push him towards doing it. And the idea that all that thematic links back round to, you know, this Lady Bella, even though she's an old lady, inspired so much of him by like showing her dreams and showing her creativity, and he is falling for the young version of her because it's this, you know, of course he's excited by this young woman who actually feels life and love and laughter and isn't just beaten down by the dystopia around her, further represented by the fact that no, she's not been doing the new technology that's mandated. She's just been living on her own, doing her own thing. And yeah, like the thematic side of it works. What he's actually going through and what we're rooting for him to do to wake up so he can save himself is solid and makes sense, and that's real. So those things working, yes. The one part I cannot really make sense of is the timey-wimey stuff where there's like moments where it feels like he got a hint earlier on from like a weird hallucination that now is making sense in the dream. That part I can't quite get around, but everything else more or less works.
I mean, honestly, I really like your explanation from the viewpoint of he just remembers stuff from earlier on, and he's using that as the explanation why. Because even when he says he hears a whistling noise, he asks Bella about it. Bella's like, oh, it must just be the pipes. Like, she doesn't even think there was anything there to begin with. So clearly there is this idea of he's just hearing things, seeing things, and then he attributes it to whatever it is in the dream. It's, again, a kind of an Inception thing where you attribute this meaning as you bring it down into the dream yourself. Like, it's not something that is just there already.
For sure. So yeah, he does wake up. He looks around. He gets himself out of the building. He runs outside. He looks at the house, and then he has a moment where he realizes, no, I can't just let it all burn. And he runs back inside. The music swells as he goes to save the turtle. He goes to save the helmet that can block the ads, because that'll help prove to other people that this is a thing. And he goes to save that tape because he never got to finish it. The tape with a star, with that dream that she wanted him to see. So he gets all that, and the movie ends with him back at his place, and he's got a bandage over his head, so he's been checked out. He's fine. And he puts the tape into. Luckily, he's got an old VCR kicking around, and he just plays it on his projector to watch it. And we see it play out again. We see the picnic, and we see the hugging, and of course the taking away of the leaves to eventually reveal. And I think the idea here as well is that the fact that he turns out to be the one under the leaves in the dream makes me think that when he's awake and he's seeing the videotape version, that makes me think the videotape version is Bella underneath the tape, from like a cross thematic sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that just makes sense to me. But he's watching this, and obviously it turns out to be him, and they have a day. They're holding hands. They're going through the forest. It's a whole thing. And the movie actually ends with them together walking towards the Strawberry Mansion, which we already saw burned down, of course. But to me, the ending kind of represents that he's willing to dream again. Like, he's actually going to dream about things that he wants. And, he wants love. And obviously he can never have it with Bella, but just the idea of Bella being so inspiring, and that's why he falls for her. And it's actually kind of like an interesting dynamic, because there's these little moments where it'll like shift to like the old version of Bella for like a quick moment, when he's imagining having dinner with her or whatever. And it's like, this is kind of weird, because obviously he's not going to pursue a relationship with a woman who's 80 years old. But at the same time, it's like, what was that?
And dead.
And dead.
That also is a bit of a damper.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Sure. But at the same time, it's this idea that just the idea of who she was is so inspiring, he couldn't help but fall for her. So I don't know. There's definitely a sweet kind of romantic idea here, even though it could never just be a conventional romance. This could never have ended with an actual romance playing out, even though in his dream it seems to, where they walk together holding hands at the end towards the house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I by the time we hit the end of them walking towards the Strawberry Mansion, I was already like, I had my phone on the table and I was just ready to pause, and I was like, okay, what the hell did I just see? And I had to sit with it. Like, I had to evaluate everything that came out from this. And I was on initial gut feeling. Like, again, it does such a good job of playing on the emotions. It makes you feel like those big epic moments work. And then it brings back the tape that you're like, oh yeah, what's on the tape? What's going on there? It works on an emotional level. So when I left this as a gut feeling, I felt good about the movie. Like, I was already in a positive place, but I felt like there was so much more to uncover. Yeah. Like, it's so much deeper than just the first go around.
I think if I'm to analyze like her wanting him to see that tape, and let's ignore the idea that maybe she dreamed about him before she met him, because that opens a whole can of worms that I can't even get into. But let's say she dreamed about him, that the night after she met him, right? Because he's there for a couple of days before she dies. Right. And she wanted him to see it. I think the idea here for her is not to show that she has feelings for him in a romantic sense or anything like that. I think it's more about showing, hey, your presence has meant something to me. You have popped up in my dream, and like, you're a presence that I appreciate. I appreciate you being here. I don't want to maybe go as far as say inspiration, but maybe you could argue, yes, in some way, you're an inspiration to me. You're important. You're not just a cog in the machine to buy products. You mean something to me as a human being. And that ties into like how personable she is with him from the second he shows up. She wants to invite him in. Stay here. Don't go to a motel. Here's dinner. Here's ice cream. Here's you know, whatever. Like, she's constantly acting like that. And I think it's kind of like a final hurrah from her to be like, hey, you can mean something to me in a way that's beyond what your life currently has. And in turn, he's like seeing her in his dreams and is like, hey, being like, I think obviously she's a lot more inspiring to him than her because he needs the inspiration a lot more. But this is her way of saying, hey, you can be important in this way.
All right. I hear you. I get it.
Where are you going with it?
I just want to throw out my entire symbolic reading of the entire movie.
Go on. Hit me with it.
Okay. So let's start with the advertisements. Buddy is absolutely the representation of just advertisement in general. It is the idea of this corporate push and the idea of like having to monetize things. Young Bella is the concept of content, of art. It is the content of this is art in its purest form. The Prebles, he is the avatar of the audience. So already we have this dynamic where the audience in this world has become so buddy-buddy up with advertising. It is completely emaciated with each other that basically the only form of entertainment they have at all via the stream stuff is advertisement. It is stuff that is constantly being pushed and marketed to you. Then one day he finds out there is actual honest to God art out there that does not get pushed to you. It is not trying to sell you something. It is there for the sheer sake of enjoyment. And obviously the advertiser doesn't like that at all. So it starts pushing against it. Back in the real world, you got this idea that the artist, the person creating the art, is the person who is literally the mother of the advertiser. The advertiser can't exist without art being already there because then it would have nothing to latch onto. So the advertiser needs the artist to exist, but the art does not need the advertiser. As you continue through the rest of the movie, as you get to the end stuff, I'm not going to pretend like I have a full grasp on what the blue demon is or what the ship with the rats stands for. Get your own stuff there. But by the time we hit the end, I think that the general vibe as we wrap this up that we're going for is that the art and the audience are able to coexist without the advertisement being present at all. Like it is now, they have completely, it's not this is the part that gets me, is that the room is painted the exact same color as the house, but it's all internal. Like you are stuck in this room and you see the color, but it's like you're trapped in by it. Whereas in the Strawberry Mansion, it's a wide open field. It's all this other stuff. And the color, the splash of color is just a little hill out on the horizon. It's not suffocating. It's not something that is keeping you cramped in. It is something that is freeing. And I think that is...
The possibilities are endless.
Right, absolutely. And you're not stuffed into the single cage. That's the idea. The advertiser sees this splash of inspiration and they suffocate you with it. Whereas she takes the splash of inspiration and she makes something beautiful and nice out of it, but there's plenty of other stuff that you could do with it. So that's my reading of pretty much the whole movie.
No, I like it. I think it works. In particular, the part about advertising needing the art to exist first, and the idea that advertising leeches onto art, which we see with, okay, you have art, well, we have to put commercials on it, we have to make it, monetized in some way, and then that keeps getting more aggressive, and eventually you get to the dystopia that's in this movie.
Absolutely.
No, I think that works. I don't think anything you just said there it goes against anything else we've already said either. Like that just all works on top of that, which works really well. I think ultimately it's a movie that's about loving stuff and feeling for what you actually care about, and you can't feel that for product placement. You can feel that for stuff that you actually want to share. Call it art, call it like love, call it whatever you want, but something that is actually not driven with like a purpose. It's not got a ulterior motive. It's there for its own purpose. And that's kind of, and I think that sweetness and that sort of like in a weird way, even though you have to sort of think about it to get the full message and actually talk about it, and I think talking about it has made me like the second half of it more, because I think as I was watching it I was like, oh, I wish this was maybe intercutting with real stuff a bit more to break it up or give it a bit more structure. Having talked about it, I think like I like it a bit more. but it does kind of oddly wear itself on its sleeve in a way as well, even though it doesn't, even though, like, yeah, you have to think about the layers a little bit to maybe get to the complete meaning. It also just feels like it's not hiding its weirdness, and it's not hiding, like, because you and this is not to say that a movie that does this is bad for doing it, but you could easily hide these things into something that's a bit more subtle, or we're going to do a thriller but have this be the subtext to it or something like that. This feels like it's no, the entire thing is got the tone to try and make you feel the joy of the art in a way that the movie wants to evoke that feeling. It wants to give you the feeling that the character has as he's in this dream watching her. And that's the main vibe that the movie chooses to go with. So the villain is threatening when he becomes a thing, but it's never like, it never turns into a dark thriller where it's, oh my god, I'm actually scared for what will happen to Pueblo. It's never goes for that feeling.
I don't know if you've ever seen this one. The Adjustment Bureau. Do you remember that one?
I haven't actually, no.
It doesn't really spoil that much, but there's this whole chase sequence at the end where it's just them like running through doors that lead to other locations that you wouldn't expect. And I feel like if this were that sort of dark thriller, that's the kind of sequence we would have, where they're just like running through dream sequences to all these different crazy locations. But I'm really happy with the way that this one turned out, because it does. You said it before, as much as you hate the term, it has this whimsy to it. It has this thing of, it's not trying to be this uber serious, like, oh, this is really contemplate the deep meanings of this dark dystopia that we live in. It's like, no, that's not what we're here for. We're here to appreciate the good things rather than dunk on the bad things. Yeah.
I mean, it's not so much that I dislike the term whimsy. It's just that I tend to not like things that you would describe as whimsical, right? I'm not a big Disney guy. I'm not a big Nintendo guy.
That's fair.
I don't like musicals. Musicals are too whimsical for me, typically. But this definitely taps into a slightly different type of whimsy that kind of works. Like, there's kind of a, dare I say, dreamlike quality to even like the regular parts of this movie. You know, it feels like it's just in a kind of slightly offbeat version of the world where we get to have the characters make these realizations in ways that we only wish that people in the real world could have, you know? Because we kind of enter into Bella's world. Like, it's her house, it's her, you know, like, dreams we go into. It's like all kind of like being filtered through this idea of, hey, this is something that we've all lost, and like we need to like sort of keep connected to this. So
I like how in the initial scenes we keep on having Bella refer to Prebbles as the tax man. And at that point, that is what he is. Like, he is absolutely the tax man. But then later on, as he's moving on, like the young version especially, because obviously the old version doesn't have much room to speak in that second half, but it turns into Prebbles. It turns into this, how she's appreciating him as just someone who can appreciate this nicer thing rather than being someone who's locked into the old system. And it makes someone who would order a chicken shake.
Yeah, and it makes me think back to that scene where she talked about like being married once and having this son, and that husband being kind of a bad guy. And you know, I was kind of expecting to learn more about that when it was first brought up, but thinking back to that conversation now, I think if nothing else, it kind of implies that she had kind of she went through a metamorphosis herself between those marriages, where maybe like when she realized she wanted out of that marriage and away from that husband and away from that family, maybe that was kind of a similar period in her life where she realized all these things. And, you know, that new husband was the husband she found when she was, you know, thinking with love. She was thinking with art, and she you know, what's the right word? Blossomed out of it, like, you know, like a butterfly.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're talking about it from a symbolic standpoint of like, you know, her representing artists as a whole, you have that first relationship which gave birth to advertising, and then she doesn't even say the father's name. She's just like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But then the second relationship comes around, and what is the one thing that they do? It is a way to counter the advertising. It is a way to stop that and try to get beauty back into the space.
Which also feels like just the kind of like a mirror of how a lot of people grow up. I mean, even taking the advertising thing out of it, like, I think a lot of people, like, particularly, I mean, this is maybe more of a guy thing, just from experience, but this idea that you go through a period in your teens into maybe your early 20s where you don't like anything that is remotely considered a bit more kid-like or child-friendly. You tend to go, oh, I want darker stuff. I like thrillers. I like violence. I like Tarantino and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with liking all that stuff, but you kind of shy away from liking anything that you maybe liked when you were younger because you think it feels too kiddie. But then I think most people get to an age at various points where they go, you know what? No, I like joy. Why am I denying myself of this joy? Because I think someone will consider me to be childish for still wanting to watch, I don't know, pick a kid's movie, oh, someone will think I'm childish for watching Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or something.
Right.
There's joy in that. And it almost feels more mature at a certain point to accept something that is more aimed at kids that you can still enjoy and see the beauty in, than saying, no, I have to be serious and it has to be all for the... And I think you can almost parallel that in some ways to oh, everything has to have a purpose, so we have to have ads and everything has to be that.
Right.
No, it can just be the thing that brings happiness or joy or a feeling or whatever it might be to whoever's going to consume it.
Yeah. Not everything has to have a reason to it. Not everything has to have this commodity attached to it. It can just be for the sake of happiness and joy. Yeah.
Yeah. The stories typically will have a reason or a message in the story, but they don't have to have a purpose and as a commodity, as a product to be sold. So have a little joy in your lives, I guess. Yes, this is pretty good. I like the movie quite a bit. I don't know how the others would have turned out, the ones that didn't win the vote, but I kind of when I was looking for movies to do, I put the stuff that seemed more likely to be good just straight onto the schedule, and then some of the sort of maybes I put into the vote, and this one turned out pretty well. So I'm pleased that they picked this, and I would recommend it.
I'm curious how many people who voted for it have actually seen it, or did they just go by reputation or buzz or whatever? I bet zero. I bet they just saw the name Strawberry Mansion and thought, that sounds weird, I'm going to make them watch that. Well, you're very right. Good job. I'm pretty sure that was the entire through line. Mm-hmm. So, no, it's very good. I'm glad we watched this one. I think it I was drawn into it very quickly. The style, the tone got me very early, and then it kept adding stuff to the dreams, and I was really into what it was adding. And while I said at the start here, I was initially maybe a little thrown that it kind of just went on to symbolism in the back half. I think talking about that has made me at least appreciate what it was doing a bit more. And I could see myself enjoying that back half a bit more in a rewatch, knowing it's going that way, rather than expecting, oh, there's going to be more stuff where they figure out there's things in the dreams to find, or we actually, I don't know, see him go and try and show this to someone, and they learn more things about what's getting forced into dreams. Is it just ads, or is there more malicious stuff being put in? Is there political ideas being put into dreams? There's a lot of places you could take that if you wanted to go down certain rabbit holes. I can't wait to see Vanilla Apartment Building. I was going to say Vanilla Bungalow. That one works. There you go. I thought it sounded funnier, but all right, David, what is your scene of the movie? Oh God, I mean, it's I could literally just pick any moment from the back half, and it's just all right, that was weird enough that it caught my attention. I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made for the meteor crashing moment that you were talking about before. I think there is a argument to be made for the moment in the restaurant where he sits down for the first time. I think for me, the moment that stuck with me, kind of just because it was the only moment that really shook me up. It really got me for where is the direction of this movie going to go from here? Even after all the other twists it had. The sit-down dinner scene with the blue demon thing, where it just starts screeching at them, and then it starts eating chicken. There was a little bit where they're presented with a head of lettuce, and they start eating it, and then they see on TV there's a lettuce recall, so they immediately get freaked out. I'm sure there's layers of symbolism in that as well, far beyond my capabilities, but that was the sequence where I was this really could get menacing at this point. It didn't end up going that way, but it was it was a shock to the system, to be sure.
I think my reading the moment for that, and this could be wrong, but just to go on with the advertising stuff, it was like, no, lettuce is something that's just grown and is natural and is sold as is. That's not a product. That's not something that's got a brand on it. That's not something that's got, you know, whereas, you know, the slop that the wolf is eating is presumably, you know, like, oh, he bought that from...
Yeah,
like,
that's high branding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, he's scarfing down a meat product, whereas they're left with a vegetarian option.
Yes.
And then the vegetarian option is the one that's recalled, which, as we've seen the chicken through the rest of the movie, I'm sure that there's something to say meat is equal to something.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, I feel like companies, like, well, they probably have figured out a way to monetize veganism and stuff like that by having specific products for those people and, you know, make that kind of work as its own line. I'm sure initially the idea of like, no, these people should just be buying all of our meat products. So why do we have to cater to them? Like, you know,
how am I supposed to work in high fructose corn syrup into corn? It doesn't work.
Just add it to everything. Just, you know, inject it into the oranges or something. I don't know.
Just put it in the roots of the trees. It'll suck it up.
All right. So did you pick that scene? Was that your pick?
Yeah. That's
okay.
pick.
Yeah, I don't know what to pick. Like in some ways, like I almost like see when he gets hit over the head, because actually I never really mentioned this, but when he first gets hit over the head as he's inside the helmet and he's in the dream, I thought that was going to cause like a malfunction where he ended up in the dream and like a more because he starts glitching out and it's like he's like flailing around with the video effect and all that, and I thought, oh, maybe something weird will happen because he's been killed. Not that he actually is killed, but I thought maybe he's dead, and like because he died while he was hooked up to this, it'll do some weird science fiction-y thing. It didn't do that, but it, like that was a cool little moment. But I don't know, in some ways, like I almost want to pick the dream sequence where he's like watching her dream in the restaurant and he sits down with her, because it's kind of a quiet little moment before you sort of realize, okay, he's starting to really feel something for her, and like this is kind of a weirdly absurd but beautiful moment. But at the same time, yeah, the ultra epicness of his comet coming out of the sky and going into the ice cream is just so weird and big that it's hard not to pick that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pick that, but I wanted to mention the other thing. So.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how you do your selections for what goes at the pre-roll before the review, but like I both do and don't want you to put the comment in just so people aren't aware of it if they choose to watch it.
I do try to be wary of something that's like obviously spoilery. Sometimes you get away with something out of context because you can't really tell what it is outside of the visual. I mean, I don't know. Some of it's a little bit random. Some of it's just looking for shots that are nice and long. I mean, some movies I'll go into and go, okay, I have to get at least one shot of this character, at least one shot of this idea, because these are the sort of fundamentals. And then there's some movies where I have no idea and I just kind of skip through the movie looking for a good shot. And
we'll see which one this one is.
I mean, it gave me a lot of visuals to work with. I can't deny that.
Absolutely. All right. MVP?
MVP.
God, this is one of those ones where like I kind of want to give it to just like a concept rather than a particular actor, but at the same time I don't know what the concept would be. Like LSD is a concept. MVP of the movie. Now I think that the actors are good, but I don't think there's anybody who really stands out that strong for me. If I had to pick one though, I don't know. I kind of want to say Prebles, but like it just nothing in his performance really jumped out at me that much. It was more so in the structure and editing and like all the technical stuff that really made me care about his character more than his like performance of it. So I guess if I'm gonna pick, I'll go ahead and say Prebles, but I'm gonna say specifically like the character itself and like his journey rather than what the actor actually did with it.
Okay.
I know it's a specific thing, but
yeah, I'm going to say young Bella. And
okay,
again, not so much. I think the actress did a fine job, but it's more just this idea of how important she is to the movie because she's this allure of the freedom and of like, the art and the love as opposed to the life that he's been living, and just how inspirational that is. And it makes it exciting. You know, that first moment, and this could have also been like a scene in the movie, to be honest, is where it's his dream, but you can tell she's trying to get in, but the advertising guy's not letting her. That's like such a strong moment thematically to me that I think that character does a lot of heavy lifting to kind of give the movie this heart. And especially when you realize that for the most part, it's not really like a person, it's just the idea of the person in his head that's inspirational to him. It's kind of a really nice thing there. So I'm going to go with her. So, all right, what are you rating Strawberry Mansion?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's good. It's very good. I'm above a 7 for sure. I'm just trying to figure out how far above. I think that it's okay. So as you said before, it's very strange in a lot of ways because it's purposely doing some of its technical stuff in a worse way. Like the acting performances on some of these people at points, it seems very poorly done to someone who doesn't quite know exactly what they're going for here. But then do you consider that to be poorly done if it's exactly what they're going for? So there's a trade-off to it. Some of the special effects are absolutely stupid. There's a sequence that we didn't even talk about where the dad of young Bella in the dream pops out of a grave as a dancing skeleton.
Yeah, I mean, they even mentioned that because it
it barely has anything to do with anything. But it's not a great special effect.
Don't
it's
say
weird.
that. Someone's going to write an essay about why that's the most important moment in the whole movie.
I'm sure it is. And I would love to read it, but I didn't get it. But no, I think from a technical standpoint, it's doing things well, but it's doing them in a way that is like almost purposely not looking great. But like that's the charm of it. That's what makes it work. And then in terms of the symbolism, in terms of all that other stuff, the plot, how it made the emotions swell towards the end, I honestly think it hits the great mark. So I'm going to go ahead and say this one is... I think I'm going to go with an 8, but there is absolutely room for improvement on rewatches.
Okay. Yeah, I think what you were saying there about the acting and like, you know, how do you grade that when it's intentional what they're doing? I think if it's intentional and they're hitting what they're supposed to be, as someone who's used to stuff like David Lynch where he intentionally has his actors speaking like these weird, like long drawn out pauses and kind of stilted ways, I kind of love it when a director's confident enough to do something like that and have them not act like real people, but not like bad actors either. There's kind of this weird surreal quality to the way people are delivering lines. I think if you can nail that and it feels like it's true to itself the entire time, I don't think you'd take off a single mark for that. Even though I know some normies will just hate that it's not normal performances. It's so weird. It's too dreamlike. I need everything spelled out to me like a normal film. Wah, 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 wah.
Give me my chicken shake.
My chicken shake. Yes. I love the symbolism for a complete dystopia in this is that turning a chicken and gravy dinner into a milkshake is the pinnacle of dystopia.
Wholesale agree. Like, screw the opening to Terminator as you know it. Just put a chicken shake on screen and I'll buy it.
But yeah, I was thinking 8 out of 10 as well. I think it hits that great mark. I think I was endeared by everything the whole time. It almost works even better for the themes of the movie. This does feel like an indie film that was made on a shoestring budget with a bunch of people who were just trying really hard, where it doesn't feel like a big product made by a big movie studio that's going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising and trailers and all that. It is just straight up what it is, and it feels like a passion project. You can feel the love in it. So yeah, 8 out of 10, and I do think it'll work well on a rewatch, which is also cool. Yeah, so
absolutely. Very good. I know that I am literally the worst human being on earth because I do this, but I do have YouTube Premium just because I couldn't with ads anymore.
I mean, I have it for the music service, and it just happens to come with the premium side of it, but go on.
Right, absolutely. I loaded the movie up on YouTube without YouTube Premium, and it is free with ads, and something about that just feels wrong. I don't like that.
But you pay for not having ads, so why is that? You pay for that privilege.
The fact that this movie exists and it yells about how stupid advertising is.
Oh, sure.
And then it's free with ads.
Okay,
I don't like it.
Fine. That's, whatever. I looked up this directing duo, Kentucker Audley, who's in the movie, is the main character, and Albert Birney, who is also in the movie. He plays the frog. Not as big a role, but he's there.
Never even recognized him.
Their previous movie was called Silvio, and it is a comedy fantasy film. This is the description on IMDb. A small-town gorilla joins a local TV program where a series of on-air mishaps send him on a journey of self-discovery. And it's a very cheap-looking gorilla suit. So, not science fiction, but I just thought it was worth pointing out that their previous movie was about a cheap gorilla outfit becoming a TV.
So what you're saying is Criterion.
I'm just saying I would not be against checking it out at some point, is all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yes, so that is our thoughts on Strawberry Mansion. David does have his homework movie I'll get to in a minute, but before we get to that, I'll just say, if you enjoy the show, you want to support it, wouldn't be able to do this without support via Patreon or YouTube membership, whatever one works better for you. Every month, there's 2 bonus monthly shows that me and David do together. There's other bonuses as well that I do with other people, but the bonuses with me and David specifically is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, and at the $5 tier and up, you get extra reels where we review some of the worst things ever made, and oh boy, we have the works of Vanilla Ice in there, we got Jim Cata, we got Neil Breen, we got a whole host of stuff. If you like seeing us be tortured with schlock and losing our damn minds, then that's the show for you. So, yes, go check out all that stuff. Like, subscribe, let us know in the comments what you think of Strawberry Mansion. If you've seen it, that's always cool, too. So, yes. All right, David.
Yes.
Actually, I should point out as well, next week is an off week. There's no episode next week. We'll be back the week after, which is just every about 6 weeks, give or take, there'll be an off week, and next week's the off week. So, anyway, David, what was your homework movie?
Well, the theme for the vote before we got the actual answer was 2020's Gems. So I decided before we even knew what the answer was, I was going to do a movie from the 2020s. And there was one that I really needed to get done. And considering this one was a shorter one, I figured, why not? I've got the extra time. Oh. I did Avatar 2, The Way of Water.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing to do with this movie whatsoever. But
not remotely, no.
Nope. I haven't seen this one before. I missed it on the initial outing, but sitting down to watch it this time.
Had you seen the original before when you watched that for your homework?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was at least the second or third rewatch for homework. This is the first time for this one. I made the comment on the last one that time gave the first one a little bit of an uncanny valley. It just ever so slightly dipped in of like, you could see the cracks, and obviously it was fantastic at the time, but nowadays there was tiny little things you can notice. Yeah, they fixed that. I was absolutely blown away with how incredible the special effects were with this one. Obviously, that's kind of the main driving point to it.
Well, but part of the reason why it took so long to make, apparently, is because Cameron was obsessed with making sure they could do motion capture underwater, what didn't exist. You couldn't do it underwater before, and they found a way to do it for this movie.
Yeah, that's basically how I explained it to my fiance. I was like, look, the first one was because he had this idea of like the blue aliens and like shooting in a specific way. The second one is because James Cameron cannot go 5 seconds without doing something underwater. But no, I really actually enjoyed this one. I think that it carries over the strengths from the first movie in terms of it's got extremely good pacing for such a long movie. I think that you are able to stay engaged with it throughout the whole time without really losing any sense of like, okay, are we going to wrap this up soon? It brings in new concepts to Pandora. It doesn't just recycle the old plot. It's very much new stuff. It's set a full decade after, so we get a whole new cast, including like kids of not just the main characters, but also various side characters as well. I also think it does a good job of avoiding what I'm going to call the Sony problem, which is setting stuff up for what is clearly future installments without them feeling tacked on. There's stuff in here that is clearly going to be explored in future things, but it didn't feel like they were just there for the sake of, oh, don't worry, we'll get to that.
Oh no, James Cameron's already in his mind written up to Avatar 5 and knows how they all fit together, but still making this a satisfying chapter on its own. I think this is better than the first one, and I think one of the things that it does so smart is that arguably the teenage kids are the main characters, and it feels like that's something that will go even further next time, I would guess. But I really liked all that stuff.
Yeah, if I had any little even tiny critique, it's that while we do have the core group of kids that are obviously going to be the ones we follow more so over the saga, they also introduce like 3 to 4 other kids on top of that, and I started kind of just losing track of them after a little bit, especially because all of them have very native names, and it takes a little while to lock on to which one is specifically which. At least it did for me. That's my only like minor critique, but once you get over that, it's absolutely a very well made film. So I'm gonna also give this one better than the last one. I'm gonna give it a 9.
Excellent. I'm glad you liked it, because I've always defended Avatar, and Avatar: Way of Water, I think just everything went up a notch. It's almost like, okay, we've set up the world now. We've done the very, because the story in the first one's very typical. It's, colonialism, bad, help the natives kind of thing. The second one, it feels like, oh no, this is doing some really interesting stuff now with the relationship between them and their kids, and like all the stuff, and all the action's just spectacular. It's very pretty stuff. And the third one's still on track for December 2025. So we'll see.
I'll set aside 6 hours of my day to watch it.
We'll see. So that could be. Whereas like the next Star Wars movie that's not The Mandalorian, I think just lost its director, I want to say, or something.
Yeah,
I'm sure I saw something.
I think it was the screenwriter.
Yeah, because I remember thinking, oh man, it's going to take longer for the next Star Wars movie to come out than the next Avatar, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, maybe we should keep doing that until we have a story in mind that we actually want to go with. Disney.
Yeah, it's just amazing how many people have been signed up for a Star Wars movie and then left the project. Like Patty Jenkins was going to do one, Ryan Johnson was going to do a trilogy. That seems to be going nowhere.
You absolutely know that's because Disney comes in and says like, yeah, man, you can do whatever you want. We're looking for all ideas. And they're like, okay, here's an idea. And they're like, okay, few notes, just a few.
It's absurd how many people. I mean, the Game of Thrones guys were going to do a Star Wars trilogy. Like, there's been so many projects announced that then just have dissipated into the ether.
I mean, Disney Plus has at least a few of them leaking onto that, but I can't see any of them have been super standout outside of Mandalorian.
Yeah, well, that's all TV shows. I'm just specifically saying movies, but yeah, the TV shows are the only thing kind of keeping it afloat right now, bizarrely. Anyway, that's a whole tangent. So yes, Avatar, Disney's more successful sci-fi franchise compared to Star Wars.
Disney's bought out franchise. They don't get full claims to that one.
Yes, I love how Predator, Alien, and Avatar are all popping off, and Star Wars, which they also bought as well, to be fair. It's not like they originally had Star Wars either. Right. Is like they spent way more for Star Wars. Well, not as I mean, obviously they spent more for Fox as a whole than Star Wars. Right? Obviously that was a much bigger thing, but in terms of
property for property,
yeah, like they spent so much on Star Wars alone, and it's. Oh, it's funny. As someone who doesn't
they got
like
a
Star
good
Wars
hotel out of it. That's what they got.
No, they shut that down.
Oh, that's right, they did. Well, they had a good hotel.
Yeah. All right, that's the show, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed our conversation in Strawberry Mansion and a little bit of Avatar: Way of Water. But we will see you next time in 2 weeks. Otherwise, though, this week on Collector's Cut, we're doing the first Gladiator. So see that at the weekend. And then next weekend, obviously this weekend is the release of Gladiator 2, so that'll be next week's Collector's Cut. If you've not seen the Collector's Cut, that's me and David's other show, where we do different movie franchise. We do action movies, we do thrillers. We just did 90s erotic thrillers. We're doing all the Die Hard movies starting around Christmas time. So go check out that if you're interested. That is us. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching science fiction and computer and salsa.